My friends, what lays before you is the myriad knowledge of an unfathomable universe. Join our intrepid remembrancers as they explore the heresy as history. From deep within the farthest reaches of the great library of Tiska, we are the Heresy Grad School. So said the War Master in his wisdom. Go forth, my sons, and illuminate them.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Heresy Grad School, where we're covering the Scouring of Nostromo, and this is our section B to our lesson 3 of our Nostromo coverage, and we're gonna get back into some of these log files. So let's take it away.
Accessing records. Log file 947 beta.
Alright, so you guys remember Karn. Not like, of course, the cool Karn, essential, ad hoc Legion Master of the 12th Legion. We're talking, again, this creepy crypt planet Karn that is smack in the middle of the Nostromo sector. Not a whole lot of good things going for it. Entire hive cities collapsed in on themselves. Crazy, hellish midnight underworld of cannibalistic underground dwellers. It's not great. Not great for anybody there. Sounds kinda like right up Night Lord's alley, but fun fact as we delve a little deeper into this, actually not the Night Lords that created this terrifying hellscape. So, we're back here with our rogue trader in his little private military corporation of Solar Auxilia. And as they are delving further and further, trying to come up with this techno arcana that they're assuming somewhere under the ruins here, they're not finding a whole lot of valuable tech salvage. Instead, they're kind of finding evidence of what was going on. Bolt shells, actual fragments of Legionis Astartes battle plate. Oddly enough, though, it's in a black and red heraldry that's not in any records, and it's unknown to the rogue trader that's funding this expedition. So it seems to have been a bunch of Space Marines different than the Night Lords. Artifacts in this catastrophe are kind of being uncovered by the tech adepts as they're clearing these lower caverns. Now, they're finding items of Astartes war gear that have been, trashed, tossed to the side, and discarded, but they're all in this weird black and red heraldry pattern that nobody has seen before. In the very deepest vaults of these collapsed and imploded hives, they find the remaining data archives. Big giant cogitator matrix. If you can imagine the size of a hive city, imagine the computer and data looms the size of essentially small city complexes in and of themselves just to keep everything running. But these vast cogitator matrices are incredibly ancient designs, and unfortunately they've suffered extensive damage. It kind of seems from what they can piece together that the survivors of Karn's fall have sort of destroyed the automata that are supposed to have been tending to these data looms and cogitator matrices. Maybe they're trying to silence them, like the actual massive machines that kept these hives running and stored logs from everything. And now they're just more or less completely inert. So that doesn't stop our rogue trader from getting his tech adepts to kind of try and coax the machines back into life. Over a few days of just constant tech adept ritual and other chicanery, the Solar Auxilia, of course, are all the while kind of trying to push back the threat of these horrible underground mutants that are just hanging out down here. They start to piece back together a series of recordings and data entries. Now, Not a whole lot of technical information about what's going on. Definitely not any of the valuable tech salvage they were hoping to recover. Unfortunately, no STCs hidden under here. However, it does try to give them some sort of insight into what happened here on Cairn. As it seemed, the world was not just razed to the ground. This was a specific punishment that was meted out by the Legionis Astartes force that destroyed Cairn in the first place. So its armies were more or less completely annihilated, and instead of just leaving it at that, the population was herded into the depths of the hive cities before they were intentionally collapsed and sealed on top of them. Now, this mirrors pretty identically some of the descriptions of the dark compliance inflicted by the Sons of Horus when they were rolling back through on Great Crusade to Electric Boogaloo. And as they were trying to take over again and pull worlds, back under the sway of Horus, these are pretty much the exact same tactics they used here. However, Cairn, a little unique here, already sworn in service to the War Master, so probably not the Night Lords. Combine this with the weird heraldry and war gear that they're finding that they have not seen before, probably not who initiated this attack in the first place. So, guys, what are we thinking?
Yeah, Jason, I think punishment is a great word, because this world was sworn to the War Master, and clearly the retribution that was wrought on it was really severe, almost the same kind of tactics we see from, the traitor Astartes and Horus's forces. So we're back on the trail of this mysterious Legionis Astartes force, right? This is kind of, we're gonna piece together the clues and see if we can, figure out who these guys are. And we're back in the depths of Cairn, right? This is back to the classic sci-fi horror, zombies lurking around every corner. And we've got our, veteran Solar Auxilia guys finally accessing some databases that are corrupted and, trying to piece together what happened, in the final days of Cairn. And what they find is really harsh tactics, right? I mean, whoever did this was, had no more mercy, no quarter. The same type of vengeance that was, I guess, meted out on loyalist worlds was sort of returned in kind here. So no mercy for the poor inhabitants of Cairn. And we're starting to see the sort of the nature of this Legionis Astartes force that is operating sort of outside the bounds. So it's really cool how it's all coming together.
As we talk about it now, kind of thinking about it, it's almost an inverse of the Night Lord's tactics, which I thought kind of significant because we're in Nostromo. So the Night Lords would drop onto a planet and publicly say execute the ruling governor and maybe his entire family to kind of take the world over, infrastructure, army, everything else intact. These guys tend to go about it like almost the exact opposite, right? Like they've not only annihilated the armies, but have completely, like, essentially depopulated
personal.
the entire planet. Oh yeah, at this point, I'm kind of sure it is.
They do take great lengths, though, to sort of cover their trail, right? They don't leave anything behind to sort of suggest who did this. So unlike the Night Lords, when they commit their atrocities and the terror squads go down, like, it's the Night Lords that did this, right? They'll leave their banner sort of flying. But these guys are very careful to sort of cover their trail. So I think that is interesting that they will sort of operate and commit themselves to these types of engagements, but then are very careful to clean everything up.
That is a good point. The Night Lords are definitely not shy about cleaning up behind themselves.
Accessing records. Log file 948 alpha.
Beep boop, beep boop. All right. Log file 948 alpha. All right. This is another cool little box out, similar to one of the quote unquote, vid feed captures we saw earlier on in the series. But this is the best look we've gotten at one of these mystery legionnaires. So, a couple of things to note. Mark II armor shown. This is the kind of armor used very early on in the Great Crusade. Probably not a whole lot of it hanging around anymore. So it's kind of regulated to much older veterans, particularly Baroque variations of the Mark II battleplate, in fact. So the heraldry here, unlike any a rogue trader and our investigators have seen before, very deep black. The pauldrons and helms are daubed in dull red. So the Mark II armor segmented plates also have inscriptions on them. Now, these aren't symbols that are in any sort of pattern to denote, say, like a legion rank, titles, honors, anything like that. They seem almost random, sort of like the tribal runes you'd find on like World Eater's Sons of Horus. A lot of them also seem to bear a kind of primitive version of the eagle and lightning bolts of the Emperor. Now, originally, of course, this was an honor just reserved for Terrans who fought during the Unification Wars. So a pretty big deal now showing up on some of these mysterious legionnaires that we're trying to get to the bottom of. Very often considered a sign of loyalist allegiance, of course. So in the other direction, though, you've also got trophies of fallen enemies. So we're talking fragments of weapons, skulls, claws from Xenos creatures. A lot of them, again, something our investigators had never seen before. Also, sort of an odd little affectation. A lot of them carry small charms carved from green stone. They say sort of similar to Terran jade. So each of these warriors also display a strange symbol on the pauldron that would normally boast the symbol of one of the legions. So it's a circle ringed by jagged claws. So that ash white on a field of red matches the color of dried blood, allegedly kind of an ominous and sinister emblem. So we don't have any real clue to their loyalty, sort of. We can kind of piece together a few things. They're attacking traitor homeworlds. They display symbols of the original Unification War allegiance to the Emperor. But these were the warriors that plundered Cairn. Possibly for information in those digital archives that were destroyed for a number of STC templates. Also things like construction matrices and other sorts of technological salvage that were once held on by the rulers of Cairn, but are now very noticeably missing from the data matrices in those very deep caverns. So the world itself was basically annihilated and stripped clean of anything valuable before its attackers just kind of disappeared into the galaxy-wide war going on. So it's a very good cover for them to slip in, annihilate what's basically... Cairn is basically unimportant so far as it goes, strategically speaking. Eliminate the planet's defenses and strip it clean of anything valuable. And what's interesting too is our documentarian here starts to wonder like how many other worlds within the Nostromo sector kind of fall prey to similar attacks. He posits here that maybe these are forces just bent on their own gain and sort of piecing together, small individual empires, very similar to how during like the Legion Wars, before the first couple of Black Crusades come out of the Eye of Terror, how once after the Scouring, they're driven into the Eye of Terror, the 9 traitor legions kind of section off tiny kingdoms for themselves before Abaddon or say Thegus Deravec or other large warlords start compiling them in sort of that old ancient, join us or die methodology to build like a much larger cohesive force. So at this point, it's posited that if this is what's happening to some of the planets in the Nostromo sector, that it's not going to be much of a success to go back through it because there don't seem to be a lot of Night Lords still here. And 2, there's not a whole lot valuable that seems like it hasn't already been stripped, which is pretty significant considering it's this sort of, scorched earth policy that doesn't just hurt, the enemy itself. It also kind of causes problems for those coming in behind. So, guys, what are we thinking here?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this log file because if these guys are wearing, the Raptor Imperialist, which is really reserved for veterans of the Unification Wars, the Raptor Imperialist was the banner of the Thunder Warriors. It really disappears largely by the time of the Horus Heresy. I mean, we're talking 200 years plus into the Great Crusade, the outbreak of the Horus Heresy. So if these guys are Terran, which we've sort of posited and assumed that they're Terran veterans by and large, veterans of the Unification Wars, which means they've been operating for close to 200 years. And if they've been out in the dark, the Eastern fringes, who knows what they've come in contact with. And I think we see some sort of evidence of that in the Xenos artifacts that they wear, the Xenos clothes. And so we can assume these guys are pretty badass, right? They've probably rolled back some Xenos incursions during the Great Crusade. They've definitely been there and done that, is sort of the feel that I get. I think one thing that's really interesting, Jason, is, you start to wonder about these runes, right? Where do they come from? And we know that Horus had warrior lodges spread throughout the legions very early on. The warrior lodges were a way that, Horus could sort of infiltrate and manipulate his brothers, the Primarchs. And he did that really almost through the Terran veterans, because Horus was, he was there. He was the second Primarch found. Or was he the first Primarch? He was the first Primarch found. And so he's sort of always been there. And I wonder if some of these runes, which, the Rogue Trader sort of like openly wonders about, right? Because they look kind of like Chthonian runes. I wonder if they're from maybe a warrior lodge. We know that Horus targeted the Terrans specifically, or Horus's agents targeted the Terrans specifically in the
and they fully
the White Scars
too,
right?
So.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting there because a lot of the Terran veterans in some of the other original legions, like Garrow, in the original 4 traitor legions ended up siding with the Emperor, because they were more used to, they'd been around so long, they had actually fought like with the Emperor, with the Imperium, longer than they'd fought with some of their Primarchs. So I always thought it was really fascinating, the shift between Terran and later inductees from whatever their cradle world was. But it's kind of off topic, but
yeah, but that's definitely, I think, a line in the sand for a lot of the Legionis Astartes. I think when you were sort of inducted into the Legion, and then obviously the Primarch themselves, their influence. I think the Terrans that didn't go along with, sort of Horus's rebellion probably didn't do that more because they'd already been ostracized, right? They'd already been sort of, I guess, removed from their gene father. And maybe they didn't have that affiliation because they had operated so long without having a Primarch. So I think that's definitely a line in the sand that's important when we think about who these guys are. But yeah, I mean, they're just so badass. And, I mean, you talk about veterans of the Great Crusade. I mean, there was no mercy. There was no quarter given when they were rolling back, especially Xenos empires, there was no quarter. It was extermination. It was extinction protocol. And so if these guys have really been operating out there in the dark for 200 plus years, their tactics sort of start to make sense. These guys are, they just give no fucks, right? So
And,
I think that's pretty cool.
To go
that's sort of
with
where
the
we
fact
are
that
right
they've
now.
been essentially operating alone for 200 plus years. We have the rogue trader talk about how, or hypothesize really, that maybe even scouring the rest of these planets is just not going to be worth it. I mean, we had earlier in our coverage when they were checking out it was the moon base, right? And essentially all of the important tech had been just completely removed or raided or stolen. And so, I mean, these guys are both vicious and scavengers at the same time.
Yeah, Pat, you're spot on, because I mean, in log file, I guess 950 alpha, we start to see the rogue trader's motives come back in, right? I mean, the rogue trader is always going to be profit driven. So he's trying to weigh the odds right now. He's like, look, man, if these guys are really out there in the dark, number one, I don't want to run into them. I don't fucking know I don't know whose side they're on, if they're on anybody's side. And number two, I don't know if it's worth it for me to keep going out into the dark, right? The Ghoul Stars, the Eastern Fringe, and trying to either, reestablish contact or, find anything valuable. Because he's like, look, if these worlds are being stripped clean by some unknown, unseen force, I have to really weigh my options here. And this is classic rogue trader, right? Because he's like, do I keep going? Roll the dice and risk it, or do I turn around and go home, or go back and, make some money elsewhere. So I think that's I love the way they sort of unravel this story, because we've got some good protagonists, right? We had the sort of the Blood Angels captain, who we'll run into again, spoiler, and we've got this rogue trader now. So we start to see how the different motives for going back and establishing contact during the scouring operate, which I love this, man. I mean, this is so good to me. I know we spent a lot of time on Nostromo. We spent a lot of time putting it together.
Thank you.
Pat has done an amazing job of editing and production, but but yeah, I mean, it's just so good. I mean, this is the peak of the Horus Heresy book series.
And as much
we
as
do,
I mean, the text brings it alive, but even like just the little, like the picked feed that we got to look at on trying to remember the page number, but then also this pull out of like the actual Marine in Mark II with the log file 948 alpha.
Yeah, it is a tragedy that Forge World never produced a transfer series for these guys, because
I mean, we're gonna get into them soon. Are we allowed to talk
so
about
gorgeous.
them yet,
I want to see some on the table.
Oh, I can talk about them. Thank you. Well, if you guys haven't already pieced it together,
you can talk about them.
If you have book 6, but there's on the pick screen or pick feed that we talked about in episode 2, and then if you piece it together with the full color plate of the Marine in Mark II that we're talking about now, it's the Ashen Claw, and I'm trying to think if their gene seed is actually solidified. I think they're initially Black Shields, but mostly Raven Guard. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave.
Yeah, I think they started out as Korax had
That's
this
right.
weird, unexplicable mad-on for Terrans in his legion. So when he couldn't get them all killed by Xenos, he sent the rest of them out towards the Ghoul Stars. And these definitely legitimate,
which has a
nomad
potential
fleets.
tie-in to the Kakeradons if anyone else plays Space Sharks. But yeah, no, it's cool to see like this origin of essentially like this nomadic group of Marines. Yeah, no, it's just so cool. And yes, Forge World needs to make transfers.
It would be terrific.
But yeah, we'll definitely get into some more of I think the background and the motivations for the Ashen Claw, right? And because they are, I mean, as Jason said, they're a nomad fleet now, and they've been ostracized by their gene father, and they've been sort of
at least
second class citizens,
The Dab War, they do have so that would be M41. They do have like a solidified hold, like a home world. So I'm assuming as of right now, like where we are in the book, in this scouring portion, they're still nomadic, that they don't necessarily have a home yet. But who knows? We may discover that later on.
There's a lot to come, guys, and we have some suggestions for further reading in the syllabus. I don't know if we've posted that, but if you guys follow us on Patreon, I'll make sure I get that syllabus up there. We have there's a lot of background lore that you can dig into for these guys, and the Kakeradon series for sure is critical to sort of piecing the puzzle together.
I think that is it for us. So we hope you all have enjoyed this lesson of the Scouring Nostromo, and we'll see you next time. Now fuck off, Craig.